When we talk about risk in the business world, our minds usually go straight to the big ones, right? There's credit risk, the chance a borrower just won't pay you back. And then there's market risk, all the chaos of stocks and bonds. But there's a third, much sneakier category, operational risk. This is the risk of loss from stuff just breaking. We're talking failed internal processes, people making mistakes, systems going down. It's the unseen threat. And in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly how the pros manage it. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on this unseen threat. Then, we'll walk through the exact framework professionals use. It's a simple but really powerful equation for finding, controlling, and ultimately making smart decisions about the risks that are just part of the everyday grind of doing business.
So what is it that makes operational risk so different? Well, it's not just about numbers in a spreadsheet. Nope. It's about literally everything that can go wrong in the day-to-day operation of a company.
And to really put this in perspective, just look at this timeline. The discipline of managing credit risk, that's been around for over 60 years. Market risk, about 40. But a formal system for operational risk management, it's basically a teenager, only about 15 years old. And that youth is a huge reason why it's so often understood.
This right here highlights a massive difference. With market and credit risk, you've got these super complex models measuring value and probability. But with operational risk, it all boils down to two really basic questions. How often do bad things happen? And when they do, just how bad is it?
Now this is where it gets really interesting and a little scary. This slide points to the single biggest challenge. Think about it. A bad loan has a limit, right? It's the size of the loan. A stock can only drop to zero. But a huge system failure or a massive internal fraud, the potential losses are, well, they're practically unbounded. There's no ceiling.
And that leads to all these unique headaches. You can't just sell off an operational risk like you can a bad stock, because it's baked right into your business processes. And the data shows that the losses have what they call fat tails, which is a fancy way of saying those incredibly rare black swan events are so huge that they end up driving the entire strategy.
So, how on earth do you manage something so complicated and, frankly, unlimited? You need a system. You need a framework, a clear, logical way to bring some order to the chaos. And that brings us to the absolute core of it all. This simple but incredibly powerful equation. This is the engine of operational risk management. You start with inherent risk, the risk that's just naturally there. Then you subtract all the controls and fixes you put in place. That's your mitigation. And what you're left with is the residual risk, the risk you got to live with. We're going to unpack every single part of this.
This table shows you how that equation actually works inside a company. Finding that inherent risk, that's a team effort between the business and the risk experts. But designing and building the controls, that falls on business management, the folks who actually own the processes. And finally, you have the board and the senior leaders setting the risk appetite, basically deciding how much pain the company is willing to stomach. All right, let's get into step one. Before you can control anything, you first have to find it. You have to identify all those risks that are just a natural built-in part of doing business.
So how do you do that? Well, managers basically have to become detectives. They can't just sit back and wait for something to go wrong. They have to proactively dig into their own business processes, asking some really tough questions to uncover things that could fail before they actually do. And that detective work focuses on 4 key areas. First, the drivers. Why would something break in the first place? Second, the environment. What safety nets are missing? Third, the metrics. Are there any warning lights flashing on our dashboard? And finally, scenarios. What's the absolute worst that could happen here? Okay, so once you've found a risk, the next logical step is to build your defenses. This is the mitigation piece of our equation. This is where you roll up your sleeves and actively try to reduce how often a loss might happen or how bad it could be. But you can't just throw money at the problem and hope for the best. Good mitigation means you got to do some thoughtful analysis first to make absolutely sure you're solving the right problem in the right way. And that means you have to get to the root of it. It's all about finding the root cause. Can a clunky manual process be automated to get rid of human error? Is there one single weak link in the chain that needs to be reinforced? The goal here isn't a band-aid fix. It's a solid, end-to-end solution that actually works. So after you've built all your walls and set up all your defenses, there's always some risk left over. You can never, ever get it down to zero. This is your residual risk, and learning how to manage it is one of the most important parts of this whole process.
The big takeaway here is that getting to zero risk is a fantasy. The real goal is to understand, to measure, and to prepare for whatever risk is left. And to do that, You have to look beyond what's already happened and start imagining what could happen. And that, my friends, is the million-dollar question. How do you prepare for something that's never happened to you? The answer is a really powerful tool called scenario analysis. It's basically a structured way to stress test your business against things that are plausible but really, really bad.
So you get teams together in a room to ask these tough questions. Hey, that massive cyber attack that hit our competitor, could that happen to us? If it did, how big would the damage be? And what's one thing we could do right now to be just a little bit more ready for it? It's all about building resilience for the unknown.
And that brings us to the grand finale, the last and most strategic piece of the puzzle. We've found the risk, we've built our defenses, and we've modeled what's left. Now, it's time to make the big decision.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this one simple comparison. You take your final number, your measure of residual risk, and you hold it up against the level of risk the board has officially said the company is willing to take on. If your number is lower, you're golden. If it's higher, well, then you've got some hard choices to make.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Operational risk management isn't about trying to create some impossible zero-risk company. It's about giving leaders the information they need to make smart trade-offs between how much it costs to add more controls versus the benefit of going after a business opportunity. You see, when you do this right, the risk team stops being just a defensive department and becomes a real strategic partner. It helps the company figure out where to invest, how to make its processes better, and how to grow in a way that's both safe and sustainable. It's like a compass for the whole organization. So we'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you've got the framework, inherent risk minus mitigation equals residual risk, I want you to think about your own workplace. What are the unseen risks, the hidden process failures just waiting to happen? And more importantly, what's the very first step you could take to start managing them?